Hello, my name is David Krulowich, and here's my presentation on my experience biking from Buffalo to New York City on the Empire State Trail. Um, it was really a once in a lifetime experience. I learned a lot about bicycling, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. I have a blog which I wrote a 12-day diary of the trip on newyorkbike.world. I also have Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. So I post a lot of interesting videos on my YouTube also of opinions on biking and also, some fun trail experiences all over the state of New York. About me, I'm an urban planner based in New York. I was a former employee of the New York State Department of Transportation Bike and Pedestrian Group, where we oversaw bike and pedestrian programs throughout the state. I also have experience working at MTA, New York City Transit, as well as the District Department of Transportation Bicycle Group in Washington, D.C. Um, After my trip, I wanted to document what I saw and my experiences, so I created a website where you can check it all out at www.nybike.world, also known as New York Bike World. And yeah, it has uh, stuff about how I decided to go on the trip, what gear I bought, what bike I bought, what modifications I made to the bike, a bunch of different info leading up to the trip, the itinerary, thinking about trip planning. So my hope is it would be a resource for anyone wanting to do this trip, and also a resource for anyone interested in cycling or urban planning or bicycle planning in general. I have a big list of plans and design documents people can reference on the website that describe all types of bike infrastructure across the state of New York, different plans in different towns and cities, municipalities across the state. So um, there's a lot of information on my website. I hope you guys can check it out. Uh, and I hope it helps move the needle on biking in the state of New York and nationally, maybe even internationally. So when I moved up to Albany, this was my worldview of New York State. Coming from downstate New York City area, when you come from downstate, you come from one of the counties in the blue down here, and when someone says, upstate, they mean all the counties in the red. So if you're from New York City, you say, I'm going upstate, it could mean a bunch of different places in New York State. And I actually learned this the hard way when I started at my job at New York State DOT. A colleague on my first day of work said, "Oh, I heard you moved here." And I said, "Yeah, I moved here." And he said, "Well, where'd you move from?" And I said, "New York." And he said, "Well, yeah, we're in New York. Where in New York?" So when I talk about New York, sometimes I think of New York City, but New York State is a very large place with a lot of different regions. So just to go over them very briefly, um, you know, people maybe from outside of the state of New York think of New York City as really the main area of the state, and it has the most population. But there's a lot of different regions in the state. Western New York, which is where Buffalo is a wide region, a lot of farming, quite flat in that area. And to the east of that is the Finger Lakes with Geneva, New York, and Rochester sort of is in this area. East of that is central New York, which until I moved to the Albany area, I'd never heard of, which is the Syracuse region. South of that is a very mountainous area called the Southern Tier, which includes Binghamton, um, towns west of that. It's quite hilly, sort of the northern stretches of Appalachia. in spots, and is quite rural in most spots. Um, in the northern part of New York State is called the North Country, which includes all the counties on the Canadian border as well as a lot of Adirondacks. And This is a huge region, which includes areas like the Tug Hill Plateau, and some areas, a bunch of the Adirondacks, and then there's a bunch on the eastern side near Vermont. There's a lot of farming area, um, and then you've got on in the center east of the state would be the Capital District, which includes Albany, Troy, Schenectady. Troy is where I was living for a period of time, and then south of that's the Hudson Valley, which is quite popular with a lot of weekenders from the city, and also has a lot of farming areas, Catskill Mountains, that sort of thing. And then, of course, you got New York City down at the downstate region. I learned that when I was living upstate. They say, "Where are you from?" I said, "New York City." They say, "Oh, you're from downstate," as opposed to people from downstate calling everything up there upstate. Anyway, that was sort of funny. And then you got Long Island on the eastern portion with a lot of beaches and that sort of thing. But just for people that didn't really know about the different regions of New York State, these are sort of the general regions of the state of New York. And the Empire State Trail, which is the bicycle route I took, went from western New York through the Finger Lakes, through central New York, briefly through Herkimer County, which is sort of in the North Country, and then Capital District, Hudson Valley, and eventually New York City. And that brings me to, what is the Empire State Trail? The Empire State Trail is a 750-mile trail across New York State. It was completed during the Cuomo administration in 2020. There's sort of three pieces to it. If you can see the little logo on the right, there's Buffalo to Albany, which is east-west. Then there's Albany to Rouse's Point, Rouse's Point is right on the Canadian border. And then the third sort of leg of it is Albany to New York City. Most of the trail is off-road, which means it's on like stone dust paths, by like separated bike paths, which is quite nice. Many sections are on road, and then in some areas, in some urban areas, they're in bike lanes, and or just on the road in cities. It was rated the #1 trail in the United States by Outside Magazine in 2022, it was a big lift to get it done. I think it took around 3 or 4 years to thread all the different pieces together, and long time planning. Next slide is the path of the trail. The leg that I did was from Buffalo to Albany and Albany to New York City. I didn't do the path north from Albany to Rouse's Point for a few reasons. One is, if you see this map, you can't really see it that clearly unless you're looking really close. But the dark green lines indicate areas where it's on a separated off-road route, and then the orange areas are in an on-road route. If you notice, north of Albany, most of it is on road, and frankly, the state did not spend as much money in the area north of Albany to the border for whatever reason. I did hear some rumors that a lot of the communities north of Albany had some issues with Governor Cuomo, and that led to not being funded up there. I don't know the exact story, but they may not even have the money. I'm not sure, but the route that most people take is from Buffalo to Albany and Albany to Manhattan, just because it's really flatter. My experience, I haven't had much experience north of there, but my understanding is that some of it is on very loud roads with 18-wheelers and not a lot of shoulder in spots, and a lot of it's on Route 22, just going all the way up to the border, and it's not as pleasant. And for me, I wanted to be able to go from one point to another. I didn't want to have to go Buffalo to Albany, then Albany up to Rouse's Point, and then back down to Albany, and then back down to New York City. So I decided to basically do sort of like what they call the Erie Canal route, which is from Buffalo to Albany and then down to the city from Albany. Um, Regarding the bicycle I bought, I had a lot of different options buying bicycles. I wanted to get something. I don't like road bikes with the drop bars, so I wanted something a little bit more upright. Um, this bike, with before I bought all the bells and whistles, was about $1,200, and it's called a Cannondale Quick One. It's 2x11, so it has 22 gears, which is good. You don't need a ton of gears for this ride because there's not a lot of really steep hills, but this seemed like a pretty good option. I looked at some Trek bikes. I looked at Specialized. They're all sort of, you're going to buy something relatively similar for the specs for a lot of this stuff. I got, and then the other things you got to really be on the lookout for. I got 35 centimeter or millimeter tires, which are wider than some other bikes. A lot of road bikes like 28 or even 32. Because of stone dust, it can be sort of stony, rocky in spots. And I wanted to have beefy tires. I also got these um, Pirelli tires that were basically the most puncture resistant tires that exist. I can't recall the exact name. It's Pirelli. I can put it in the comments if I recall, but they really basically never break unless you go over some nails or something. So it was I didn't have any issues with the tires when I was biking. I got a bunch of different bags. I got the number one bag to buy for multi-day road trips are these Ortlieb bags, which are on the back of my bike. They're waterproof, they're bulletproof, they rock. You just got to go with those. I got a saddle bag just with a spare, tires and stuff. I think that was from Cannondale. I got a front bar bag, saddle bar bag, or a handlebar bag, excuse me, a company called Road Runner. They're based out of Los Angeles. I really like this company because they make all their stuff handmade in LA. It was expensive for what it was like $120, but it was uh, it was pretty sweet, and I would really recommend buying stuff from them because they just are made in the United States. The saddle was something called a Terry Liberator saddle. I in fact learned a few days in that I really did not like this saddle, and I had a tremendous amount of saddle discomfort on my trip, which I sort of was able to conquer, but it was the first few days was very tough. And then for my handlebars, I got like 5-inch rises on my handlebars because I like biking more upright. So, these are some tweaks I did, but and I also got the rear rack, which you can't see. I think it's made by Topeak DX Tourista, and that really um, got my saddlebags on there right, and I had no problems. Um, so to go from that, the itinerary was from Buffalo to New York City. How I did it was I was living in the Poughkeepsie area at the time, and I Hudson Valley, and I biked from my house to um, Poughkeepsie, and then took the Amtrak to Buffalo with my bike, and it was roughly a 12-day trip, I would say. Um, I was averaging, I would say, 60 to 70 miles a day. To be honest, though, really, it could be done in 11 or 10 days. I did take a 1-day detour to the Finger Lakes because I went to a friend's wedding, which was sort of fun to ride by bike. And then I stayed in hotels. A lot of people do camping. This was my first multi-day trip, so I just wasn't there with the gear and being alone. I just said, you know what? I want to, at the end of biking 60 or 70 or 80 miles in one day, it's hot. I want to be able to take a hot shower. And if you do camping, that might not be an option. So that's one of the reasons why I did it in hotels. And I can get into details of the hotels later, but I tried to keep it under $120 a night, but it's not easy to do that on this in New York, upstate New York, because of just inflation, I guess. The days of $60 or $70 hotel stays are long gone, And like I said earlier, I didn't do the northern section from Albany to the Canadian border. So this is me in Poughkeepsie, getting onto the train with all my gear. Um, if you look at the photo on the right, it's something worth noting is you have to take your front wheel off to fit your bike on the Amtrak, but you also have to book the Amtrak in advance. And if there's no availability for booking your bike on the Amtrak, they won't let you on with a bike. So it's an important note. Um, I thought taking the wheel off on the bike was just sort of like, I wish they didn't make you do that because, you know, I think it shows that Amtrak doesn't really like think of bikes as first class bikers as first class citizens because, when you get on the car train to go from Lorton to Orlando or whatever, you don't take your wheels off your car. They figure out a way to accommodate it as is. So, important if you're doing this, you got to have quick release bike wheels, or you got to bring a wrench or whatever if you don't. So, important note. The trip on the Amtrak is quite long. I'd say, I don't know, 7 hours from Poughkeepsie, probably almost 8 from New York City doing this. But book this well in advance, and each Amtrak only carries about like 3 or 4 bikes. So if you're doing this with a group of guys or women or whoever it is, you got to organize that logistically because a lot of they won't let more than 3 bikes on a train. So, next slide, here we are. Now I'm in Buffalo. I'm starting my trip. This is Niagara Street in Buffalo, which I took a photo of because I thought it was an awesome bike piece of infrastructure. Notice on the left they have a lot of cool plantings and trees and protected with a curb, and I don't know, just I thought it was a great example of how to do it. I know some people when I was at New York State DOT thought there was or maybe it wasn't New York State DOT, maybe it was some people in Buffalo who were complaining that the DOT made them put in too many signs, which you notice there's a lot of signage here, but it didn't bother me too much. I thought it was really nice, and it was a beautiful day to start the trip. This photo is from just outside Lockport, New York, and I took this because this is a example of a crossing that I really thought was effective, partially because they did such a nice planting in the median of this crossing, and I wish I saw it in some areas of the Empire State Trail, and then other areas I didn't see it. If you see even on this photo, the area in the close-up is planted, but on the other side it was like paved over with stamped brick. So I don't know what went into this here, that one was planted, one was not, but putting plantings in here gives it a sense of place, and maybe some local people have a sense of ownership of beautifying this. Important to note that the Buffalo to Albany leg of the trip is called also the Erie Canalway Trail, which existed before the Empire State Trail. Empire State Trail added bits and threaded areas that didn't have really any good bike infrastructure. But it's worth noting, you'll see on the upper right hand side there's like a little bullet there. It says Erie Canal Trail. You can't really see it in this photo, but you see it, Erie Canal Trail, and then also Empire State Trail. I saw the signs interchangeable for a while. This is in Medina, New York, and I took this photo just to give you a sense of like some of the biking that's going on in areas. It's some areas are really well groomed trails, and then some areas it's like this is right on the Erie Canal, and it doesn't feel that safe at all, and you got to really watch yourself, and if you took a bad turn here, you end up right in the Erie Canal. So New York State still has a ways to go to improve a lot of the infrastructure in some areas to really make this a world-class bike facility. This guy was awesome. He was biking from Maine to Seattle, and I chatted with him a lot. What he's holding in his hands are different like pastes for your butt so you don't get chafing, which I learned about the hard way. And but he was doing bike camping, so he had all his camping gear on. I noticed all his stuff. He had a bike from a company called Salsa, which is a popular touring bike company, and yeah, he was sweet, and he gave me some good pointers on how to improve my situation on my butt hurting. Um, and this was as I was going east on the trail. Um, so on like day two or day three, I got to Rochester, and the signage was not that good. I mean, you can see the sign someone scribbled out the C on Canal Trail for a joke. And there's a lot of graffiti in Rochester, and there frankly wasn't a lot of signage on the trail. So I had to bring out my phone and use Google Maps. You can see on the photo on the right, there is a north-south part of the trail that can go from the Empire State Trail north into Rochester and then south into other areas, Monroe County. Um, you can see in the lower right it says Erie Canalway Trail, and that was the, they didn't really put up the Empire State Trail signs here, which they should have. You don't really go through downtown Rochester on the Empire State Trail. You go south, sort of near the Erie Canal, and it's not. It's a nice park, but you don't get a sense like you're in the city of Rochester at all. So, if you want to go see downtown Rochester, which is sort of cool, and they've got some things going on there, you got to go north off the Erie Canal Trail or Empire State Trail, Erie Canal Trail are both interchangeable here. But yeah, so passed through Rochester, and then east of Rochester, I went through Fairport, which I really thought was delightful, and it really had a sense that the trail was right next to the canal, and there were parks and boating opportunities and restaurants and a bunch of sort of cool development going on the canal. Um, if you look on the right of the photo, you can see those like steps going down to sort of a little park area, which was neat. Fairport also was one of the only areas in New York State that really had Erie Canal, or you call it Empire State Trail oriented development. So like these apartments were right next to the Empire State Trail facing the Erie Canal. I thought this was awesome because this is the type of development that's great and trail oriented and walkable and all the good things urban planners like. And multi-use, and there was restaurants walking distance from here. So this was awesome. Unfortunately, I didn't see much of this on the Empire State Trail at all. It really was like you're biking really just in the woods, and you're just going for miles and miles and miles. And a lot of times you feel like the communities have their backs turned to the trail, which sort of sucks. But at the same time means there's a lot of really good opportunities to improve the rider experience throughout the trail from Buffalo to New York City. So that was one place that I really thought was doing it right, as they say. Uh, I included this photo, which was I think somewhere in Wayne County, east of Rochester. Um, while Outside Magazine has rated this the number one trail in the United States, there still is a lot of it that looks like this. When it's like 1 foot of stone dust and it's almost like an ATV track. Or luckily it was dry these days, but I could imagine it being wet would not be fun. Um, the state has not invested fully in actually getting the trail to be how a real trail should look, like 10 feet wide or more, stone dust that's really compacted and easy to ride on. Some areas were also quite rocky, and that having the wide tires was good for that. But it's sort of like you got to finish the job here because there's a lot of spots where it wasn't up to any sort of standard and almost just sort of like a dirt path. This was just west of Syracuse, I believe in Solvay, New York, and I took this photo because it was awesome path to bike on, and it was this is what I was hoping that every part of the Empire State Trail would look like, with a really well groomed trail and no weeds growing in it, wide. This, I believe, was a landfill, and this was just west of Syracuse. Syracuse was awesome to bike through because the state spent the most money to upgrade the trail there. They did a bang up job. It goes to the New York State Fair. It goes to a bunch of parks just west of Syracuse, and that was probably one of my favorite days biking through Syracuse. Here's another view of downtown Syracuse, which is called the Onondaga Creek Walk. Onondaga is the county. Onondaga County is where the city of Syracuse is, and they have this cool area where there were former warehouses that have turned into offices and um, apartments, and you can bike through it. And it just had a really fun, interesting urban feel, and very bike friendly. Even though the signage wasn't great here either, I found my way around, and it was pretty sweet. Um, East of that is a large stretch of the trail, which is on Erie Boulevard, which is one of the main streets in Syracuse, and it was quite an interesting bike lane that went like right through the center of the median, and this was a big effort by the state to do sort of a road diet. I think it went from 6 lanes to four and added the bicycle and a lot of bicycle timed lights, and it was pretty good. I would say it was, had to like sort of bike up a hill sometimes to like get to the lights, which was sort of annoying. But in general, it was a pleasure to ride on. It just, unfortunately, there's none of the businesses on this street are like pedestrian oriented or bike oriented. You really like there's huge distances between lights, and you get like I stayed in a hotel near here, and like I walked to a Chinese restaurant. It was like walking through parking lots. So there was a sidewalk, but not much else. It's not a very hospitable place to sort of walk, but the biking was okay. Um, East of Syracuse, it was a lot right on the Erie Canal. So most of this trail between Buffalo and Albany is on the Erie Canal towpath. The towpath used to be an area where the mules would be attached to boats like donkeys, and they would pull the boats through the Erie Canal. So that's why the canal path is just right next to the canal. And this was a section of the canal. You can see sometimes it's like doesn't feel like the water's moving that much, and it's like a lot of weird green stuff growing in the canal. So it's not that beautiful, but there were some nice wildlife. I saw a lot of turtles and um, different birds and things. So if you're into that sort of stuff, you'll get no shortage of it on the Erie Canal path. But my only beef was it just was very, very boring for many, many miles, and not a lot of sort of stores or anything on the canal path. So something to think about. Um, Here's another section of it. This was somewhere I think near Utica, and I added this photo again just to show people that the path is not that well maintained in a lot of spots. A lot of it looks like this. So be sure to get wide tires, and luckily I didn't have a flat, but if you do have a flat, dang, I really hope you can fix it yourself, because you're going to be really far away from any bike stores. This was an on-road section. I can't remember which county this was, but somewhere near Utica, in the Mohawk Valley. I added this was an on-road, and you can see there's a nice wide sort of shoulder there, which was quite nice to bike on. This photo was included because this was one of the only places where they put these the signage for how far away you were from different locations. 5 miles away from Frankfort, New York, and 9 miles away from the Ilion Marina. Um, I liked this because this was bike friendly size. As you're biking by, it just catches your eye. It's not some huge road sign. I really wish the state had put in more of these, because a lot of times you're biking 10, 20, 30 miles and you don't get a sense of how far you are from places. You can always open up your Google Maps or whatever it is, or your Strava or whatever you have. But um, these really made me feel more comfortable biking. And I wish either the state or municipalities would do more of this. Um, while they didn't have a lot of signage showing distance, they did have these pretty cool descriptive, interpretive boards in a lot of different areas, and this did give you a sense of distances, which was nice, and explained about the different towns. Unfortunately, a lot of towns in upstate New York had urban renewal. If you can see that little logo on the bottom, and they tore down a lot of the historic areas. So that was somewhat disappointing to learn that through this signs. But this Ilion Marina had some cool stuff, and there was a bunch of people camping there, and definitely worth stopping and just poking around there when you're on the trail. This photo was in Little Falls, New York, and I included this because it was a great example of a restaurant taking advantage of its proximity to the trail. Um, they put up tables, a Mexican restaurant. Little Falls is definitely worthwhile checking out. I really enjoyed it, and it's um, it's a really cute old mill town and it has some really historic architecture. So definitely try to stop there if you can. And it just felt like one of the only places that was really welcoming to cyclists on the whole trail up in, at least between Buffalo and Albany. It really was like, okay, like, we want to encourage tourists on bikes to stop here, eat here, shop here, that sort of thing. This was in somewhere, I can't remember exactly, but this was east of Utica also, towards Amsterdam. I had this photo because this was a example. They didn't do the landscaped median. They didn't have any sort of median except that one stop sign sort of blocking cars from going in the trail. But they did put a nice barrel with some plants, and different spots you'd see sort of cute stuff, and then a lot of spots they just paved it over, which sort of was disappointing. Um, this was east of Amsterdam on the beginning of a very rainy day, and Route 5A, I believe this was, or 5. And this was, some of the on road was good, like this, wide, 6, 7 feet wide, and some of the on road was not as good. So this was an example of me feeling comfortable riding my bike, and some other areas was not as good as this, but this was a nice morning at least. It was quite rainy in spots. This is just east of Schenectady, and like I said, you can see the median, the median between the bike lanes. They didn't put any landscaping in there, which was a missed opportunity in my opinion, but whatever. They had just paved this area. It was quite nice. And just onward. This was a day where I got completely soaked, and in fact, my phone got quite wet and stopped working later in that day. Um, this is now me, this is me going past Niskayuna, New York. I added this photo in because you can see the little logo for the Erie Canal Trail and also the bigger logo for the Empire State Trail. You see between Buffalo and Albany, you just see these logos sort of interchangeably. The Erie Canal Trail was older, and looks like a lot of these signs were put up in the 90s or 2000s because a lot of those signs, the purple ones on the left, would have George Pataki as governor. Just off the trail in Cohoes is Cohoes Falls, which was one of my really big highlights. I used to live in the Capital Region in Troy, and Cohoes Falls was always a place I sort of would go on my own for some quiet solitude. And just watching the falls was really beautiful. So this was me. This was about day 6, day 7 of my trip, and was really enjoying myself. My butt was hurting a little bit less. It was in pain, but it was a little bit less. I'd just gotten used to it. I had my little speaker going on my bike, so I was rocking and rolling here. Just east of here, I stopped in Waterford for lunch, and then my phone, which had gotten wet, the phone stopped working, the screen stopped working. So I didn't have any photos between here until I got my phone repaired in Kingston, New York. But what I will say is this is where you sort of take a southward turn from Albany, and between Albany and Hudson was really a beautiful part of the trip, which goes in an old streetcar right of way called the Albany Electric Trail. And they spent a lot of money on fixing this up, and it's really a joy to ride on. South of Hudson is on road, but I would say it's mostly very country roads and beautiful farmland. You get to go through a town of Germantown and then through Bard College, and I really enjoyed this area. The only part of it I didn't love was going on the Kingston Rhinecliff Bridge, which was very narrow. And also where I stayed in Kingston, the hotel was really up a huge hill, and at the end of a 70-mile day, it was quite difficult. Um, this was a photo of a bi-directional cycle track in Kingston, which I biked on. This is through the Midtown area of Kingston, and I really dug Kingston. I thought Kingston was cool, and it's a place I would definitely try to visit and go back to. I wanted to do a couple days here, so maybe for another trip. And just an aside, if you don't want to do Buffalo to New York City, a very nice trip, I would say, is to just take the Amtrak from New York City to Albany and then take 3 or 4 days, maybe three. You can do it in 3 days, but if you want to do it more leisurely and check out stuff, I'd do it in 4 days and go 4 days down to New York City on the Empire State Trail, which is what a lot of people do, and it's definitely worthwhile doing. And Kingston's definitely a place to stop. Just south of Kingston is another rail trail, which is pretty sweet, called the Wallkill Valley Trail. And this connects Kingston to New Paltz. It goes over some hillier areas, not hilly per se, but there's some deep gorges you go over on like old rail trestles, which are pretty sweet. And then it sort of spits you out just north of New Paltz. I didn't get to go to downtown New Paltz. That was another place I sort of wanted to check out. Didn't have time. But New Paltz, there's SUNY there. It's quite sort of artistic oriented, and it's quite popular. I'd recommend checking out New Paltz. So east of New Paltz is one of sort of the jewels in the Empire State Trail. It's called the Walkway over the Hudson. It's an old railroad bridge, which was converted to a bicycle pedestrian path. I've biked on this many times, and it's just sweet. And on a really clear day, you can actually see the skyline of Manhattan all the way downtown. So very highly recommended doing this and checking it out. And then this connects into Dutchess County. I put this photo up here just to show you, like, they have in some areas, like, distances between places, but there's no unified sort of signage through the trail. It's just like, okay, some stuff was put up in the Pataki administration, some stuff was done by some other groups, some stuff was done by local municipalities. There's not really a unified scheme of signage. This was in the Hopewell Junction area. East of Hopewell Junction, you go up a very long hill, which sort of spits you out eventually on the other side of a mountain range, and into Putnam County. This area of Dutchess County is quite rural, so you really don't want to break down here, and you want to have enough water to get you going, because you're going to be really thirsty. There's no, just an aside, there are no free water fountains on the trail between Poughkeepsie and the Bronx. That's like 90 miles. So, and there's not that many places to stop for delis. There's some in Putnam, some in Westchester, but they're few and far between, and there's no really water refill areas. That's another thing the trail could do a lot better on, is either delis or especially just put in water fountains for the riders. Then, okay, so south you go into Putnam County, and then there's an old railroad trail called the Old Putnam Railway, which went from the Bronx all the way up to Putnam County, and this has been turned into a rail trail, which is pretty sweet, and goes through a lot of sort of suburban Putnam County. The photo on the right I wanted to just include because they do have the landscaped median, but in Putnam County they decided to put trees in here, which was a mistake in my opinion, because the trees have gotten huge and have, the roots have caused the trail to be quite uneven. And, I almost like fell a trip, when biking over this. It was so bumpy. I almost fell off my bike in some spots. So, maybe it'd be better to just put some shrubs and flowers in these medians as opposed to a big tree, which then can cause heaving on the, trail. So something to think about. Um, this was in Yorktown Heights, called Trailside Cafe. I had to add this because it's trail-oriented development. It's a juice bar, ice cream stand, and they had a lot of cyclists stopping there. Um, I wish I saw more stuff like this along the trail. Hopefully this will grow as the Empire State Trail becomes more popular, especially west of Albany. Between Albany and Buffalo, there wasn't a ton of stuff like this. So uh, I hope some municipalities can like rezone some of the areas near the trail to either build more housing or build more development, because the trail, Empire State Trail, is a great asset for the state of New York. This was in Westchester County. I added this because it was protected from the highway or street, whatever you call it, on the right, but I don't like biking near those guide rails. In fact, I think it's like quite dangerous. If you fall and hit that, you're going to be in a really world of pain. I wish they'd put something sort of more, even like a Jersey barrier, I think would be safer than that. So um, that was that. This is in Westchester County. This is near, I think, Elmsford. And they have these like cattle, uh, I don't know, fences to go around. It really was annoying, because they would put make you almost like make you go around these like, you know uh, whatever you want to call it, cattle fence things, and then you had to take your bike, get off your bike. And I understand why they did it, because it's like, um, you know, it's what you have to do, but because so many people bike and then they just uh, like want to go Tour de France in Westchester County. I saw a lot of these guys. Oh yeah, I'm going to go 20 miles an hour, 30 miles an hour. So I get it, but this was sort of annoying. Um, this now we're in the Bronx, Van Cortlandt Park. The trail here was nice. It was very wooded. It was a little crowded feeling. A lot of the trails in the Westchester and upper areas of upstate New York and western New York, they sort of have a 2 or 3 foot buffer around the trail with no trees or obstructions. The trail here just sort of goes like right up, the trees just go right up against the trail, which I thought was sort of nice and natural looking, but I don't think it's as safe. I don't think you can accommodate as many people as the trail, sort of clearing the areas near the trail of brush. This was in the Bronx. No, excuse me. This was in Harlem. This was a water fountain. But like I said before, um, there were no water fountains between Poughkeepsie and the Bronx, and then Bronx to 125th Street. There was a water fountain, but the trail needs a lot more water fountains, in my opinion. Here is near Battery Park. I didn't really get a good photo of this. Even though this looks sort of nice. The area between 59th Street, Manhattan, and Lower Manhattan was completely filled with people. It was my least favorite part of riding on the Empire State Trail. It just was. It had enormous amount of bicyclists. It had a lot of people crossing and tourists. There were people trying to learn how to ride a bike. It was like a total mess. And so I don't know how they can sort of segregate the cyclists from all this stuff, but it was not that fun. But it was the end of the trip, so it was I was just fired up and charged up that I was almost done. Here's me at the end of my trip, and I'm at the World Trade Center, basically right at the end of the Battery Park City area, and they had just had the sort of end of this Empire State Trail, beginning, end, whatever you want to call it. But I was really pumped up. This was on day 12 of the trip, and I was just happy to be done. I really enjoyed it, but it was very arduous, and doing 60, 70 miles a day for 12 days, you really just I was really exhausted. My hands hurt, my butt hurt. Just it wasn't very comfortable. Right near the Empire State Trail end is they have this cool sign showing the basic beginning and the end of it and bits of New York City. I just thought this was sweet, and it really was a nice sort of like end to the trip to see all this. So um, that was sweet, and I just after this I went and got a hamburger with a friend of mine, and we toasted, so it was great. Um, Let me see what. Oh yeah, the last sort of last bits, some ideas for improving the Empire State Trail. Um, like I was discussed earlier in some of my slides, unified signage. I think there's just a lot of different signs that were put up over the years, and they should have distances between towns would be much appreciated, and I think a lot by cyclists. Um, Improvements to Erie Canal section. They need to just redo the stone dust in a lot of areas, and just if it's 2 feet wide, they're going to make it 10 feet wide. They gotta really pack the stone dust, not big stony like rocky. It's almost like riding on gravel in spots. So really, they have to crush the stone or pave it if they want to. I love the paved sections, so maybe they should do more paved sections. Another idea was trail-oriented economic development. So like put more bike-oriented things on the trail area, like hotels, bike stores, restaurants, apartments. Make an experience. People go to Europe to do bike tours because they get to stop in these like cool towns, and they're just like right there, and I didn't get a sense in most areas, especially between Buffalo and Albany, that the towns have any sort of trail orientation. You barely even know you're in a town when you're biking on the trail. So maybe it's rezoning some areas near the trail for new apartments or restaurants or whatever, but they need to do a better job of that. And it's a big opportunity to really improve tourist infrastructure in upstate New York. Another example of the maximum distance between water fountains. There should be a water fountain every 10 miles, I would say, so you can tank up on water. And, that they didn't really think of a lot of that stuff. There were water fountains here and there, but, between Poughkeepsie and the Bronx is 90 miles, no water fountain. So, it's not really, that, it's not thought through. They have to spend more money doing that. And another thing would be put together a standard design for landscaping and medians. I didn't get a sense the medians they were all over the place. Some had plantings, some were paved over, some had no medians. Some had a button where you could flash a light, some didn't. It didn't seem like money was spent here, or they had been spent in different spots, but there was no sort of unified feeling on that in the trail, especially between Buffalo and Albany. And then the last thing is, they need to finish the Empire State Trail to Long Island. There's no Empire State Trail on Long Island. So, they got to think about figuring a way to get it from New York City to Montauk, or New York City to Orient Point on the North Fork. I know the Trust for Public Land has been trying to do this for a while, and they're sort of trying to think about design and all this stuff. But it's, if you're calling it the Empire State Trail and it's not in, Long Island, and Long Island's a very populous area of the state of New York, and I think it would, it would mean a lot to get the trail going out there. I know you could sort of thread it through parts of eastern Queens and that sort of thing, but my understanding is in Nassau County it's very difficult because there's not much right of way to do it. And then in Suffolk County there's some power line right of way which they could get some parts of it done, but who knows. Anyway, so yeah, that's something that they should look into, in addition to improving the trail that already exists. And then, here's a map of the trail. So I did the bit from Buffalo east towards Albany and then down to New York City. And they have a website here. If you click Empire State Trail, you can see all types of info. They have interesting design documents on how the whole thing was constructed. So definitely worth checking out. Um, and then, that's about it. This was, I highly recommend you check out my website and blog and Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. Sign up for all of it so you can stay abreast of the New York bike world. And I really hope you enjoyed this presentation. And I really enjoyed the bike ride. I would recommend anyone who is interested to do this bike ride from Buffalo, New York, because you're going to learn a lot about places in New York State that maybe you've never been. I sure did. And, it's a great life experience. I'd recommend it to anyone. Thank you very much.